Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. All backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Ladies and gentlemen and listeners of the Randomness of Nothing podcast, success is always about the person that starts at their age and dreams, and then they picture themselves doing their dreams. This man is the epitome of following his dream. He's a former taxi driver that climbed the hills of Hollywood, Broadway, record producing, and entertainment. Mr. Julian Schlossberg, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashad. Thank you for having me. And yes, I did drive a cab, and it was the second hardest job I ever had. So you got to know what the first is, right?
Yeah, you set this one up. Let's go.
The pin boy in a bowling alley.
Seriously?
I'm telling you, you handle 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And you're putting the pins up, and often this is going to sound chauvinistic. It's not meant to be. It's just a fact. Mm-hmm. No man ever rolled the ball while I was putting pins up, but women did. Fortunately for me, they didn't come too fast. So I
good.
Be putting the pins up, and I hear brum, brum.
Yeah. For
that
people,
was the hardest job. I was the only. There were about 8 pin boys and myself, but I was the only one sober.
That is awesome, man. You know, it's funny how I remember one time, just briefly, when I'd never really driven through New Jersey before. People who are like this foregone era, there were people that changed the pins at the pinball at the bowling alley. And then I remember I went through New Jersey once and I started pumping my own gas and like, you can't do that. And I was like, you can't do what? And they were like, you can't do that. I'm like, what? What can I do? They're like, you can't pump your own gas. And I'm like, are you like people who are like in this era of where they still make people do certain things that you wouldn't even think of? I had no clue because I'd never been to Jersey. And I was like, you can't pump your own gas, dude? Like, it was the strangest out-of-body experience. I was like, my bad, guys. Sorry about that. Waiting for Tony Soprano to come out.
Good thing they didn't arrest you.
Right. You know, I was looking for a Tony Soprano over the shoulder, right? Like, oh, shoot.
Yeah,
you know.
Right.
So you started, you know, we talked before, and people sometimes put their dream in the closet because they don't think it's attainable or there's not a lot of people around them that are pursuing those paths. And you decided through your love of film and radio and television, that young boy that said, this is the venue that I'm going to go into and I'm going to pursue it with my heart. Please tell your story.
Well, it's true. I was very fortunate, Rashad, because I grew up with radio at the beginning of my life. Now, what that did would force you to use your imagination. You're out on the range with the Lone Ranger. You know, you're going down those stairs to Jack Benny's vault, and you're conjuring up incredible, exciting things. And when the advent of television began, it was exciting for me. I would go downtown. I lived in the Bronx. I'd go downtown, and I'd see the rehearsals of the Perry Como show. They gave tickets out. And then I'd run back home to see the show an hour later to see what they changed from the dress rehearsal. I mean, this is not your typical way of living your life as a kid.
No.
It excited me. And that's what happened. Yeah. And I wanted to be part of that. I didn't know what part, but I just knew I wanted to be with those people doing what I thought was exciting things.
Yeah, and I think that the beauty about that is here you are with your mind, right? And you're sitting back and you're you know, I saw, you know, your bio where there's 14 cents, you know, movie theater tickets and things like that. And it's those small things, you know, that did you have a mentor? What was your in? Like, who did you meet? I know you were like, you know, you were the first, you were the youngest movie buyer, but by watching films, did it kind of get you into that world, so to speak?
Well, I guess it did. The person who was the most influential, I had no relatives in show business, but there was an incredible director, the George Lucas, Steven Spielberg of his time. His name was Elia Kazan.
Very familiar with him.
Yes, and he was an Academy Award winner. He won the Academy Award as director of On the Waterfront and Gentleman's Agreement.
Yes.
And he discovered Marlon Brando, Eva Marie Saint, Montgomery Clift, James Dean. I mean, he was the man.
Yes.
And to show you what kind of a weekend I must have been having, there were telephone books in those days. And I said, let me see if he's got a listing. Is Kazan listed in the New York phone book? Because I knew he lived in New York.
Yeah.
And he was listed. I couldn't believe it. And
that's unreal.
In those days, not only did they have the phone number, but they had the address. And I believe it was 1545 Broadway. Anyhow, I went over and I stayed outside. First, I went into the building to see what the office number was, but there was no directory. So I stood outside the building because I couldn't find the building for a while because it was behind the cashier's booth of the Victoria Theater on 46th Street. So
oh my goodness.
I would go by it. I couldn't find. And then finally I saw this entrance. So I waited and he came out and I was afraid to talk to him. So I started to follow him. And I followed him up Broadway and all the way to 70 some odd street where he went into a brownstone and I didn't have the nerve. So the next day I did it again. Yeah. And I again couldn't get the nerve. 46th and Broadway, at 49th and Broadway, he whirled around and he was shorter than I. He looked up and he said, "Who are you? What do you want? And why are you following me?"
Oh my gosh.
I, like Jackie Gleason in The Honeymooners, answered, He said, calm down, and come back with me to the office. So we go back to his office. It was a tiny office, just one for a secretary and for him, and he kind of stretched out like a cat on his couch.
Wow.
He said, so what is it? What do you want? I said, I want to work with you. I just want to be with you. I want to learn from you. I don't want any money. He says, listen, there are hundreds of actors who are willing to do that. I said, but I'm not an actor. He said, well, who the hell are you? I told him a little bit. I had worked at the ABC network. And at that time, I was then working for a movie theater chain called the Walter Reed Theaters. And he said, did you ever hear of A Face in the Crowd? I said, sure. It's Andy Griffith and Tony Francioso, Lee Remick. He says, I know who in it. I made it. He said,
you're just trying to, you asked, I answered. Yeah, you asked, I answered.
I mean, no matter what I said, it didn't seem to be too bright, no matter what. I think the best I did was Abba, but anyhow, how about Baby Doll? You ever hear of that? I said,
of course.
Yes. And I started to name the names, and he cut me off, and he says, look, do you think you could do anything with those two movies? I said, sure, absolutely. Having maybe one idea or two, but wasn't sure. But he said, all right, I'm getting these movies back. I have a strange but good deal with Warner Brothers. And these two movies, after 10 years, revert to me. It's now 10 years. I'll own them. See what you can do with them.
Oh,
and that's
boy.
How it began. That's how it began. We had never had it. I did it for 40 some odd years before he died. And we never had a contract. But what it did, Rashad, what it did for me was to give me credibility that if Kazan would give this kid these movies, he must be somebody. Because why would Kazan do it?
Without question.
I asked him years later, why did you do it?
Yeah.
He said, Julian, I spent my whole life casting. That's what I did. I spent my life casting. I felt you were going to be able to do a great job. So I was grateful that he cast a lot and casted me, but that was casting me,
You know what the interesting part about...
That's how it began.
That's a beautiful story. And I think that, it shows people that if you just pursue your passion, and sometimes being the bumbling, fumbling, I don't have words for it, but you can see I'm passionate about something, can be the best answer in the world. People sometimes overanalyze their qualifications. They overspeak when sometimes all it takes is personal engagement and your personal conviction. Like, I want to do this. Show me the way. I'm sure you were like, I got, one of the greatest directors of all times, filmography. I got to figure this out. So there's problems that are associated on the back end, but you had the opportunity. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing.
Well, often in that story, I made the opportunity.
Yes.
Sometimes you're not that, I guess, fortunate to be able to
Right.
do so. I was very glad that I ended up finally having the nerve to talk after he accosted me on the street.
For sure.
It's interesting too how brilliant he was. As we walked back to his office, he would point out a car, a restaurant, a person. He was almost like a voiceover, because I said nothing. I just kept thinking, I'm going to go to Kazan's office with Kazan.
Of course, without question. Yeah.
So it was a very interesting thing, and I was glad that I was lucky, but I was fortunate. I don't want to say luck, because luck implies I had nothing to do with it, but I was fortunate that he was interested enough to find out who this kid was who was following him. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, obviously you wrote a book later on, and we'll get to it. Try not to hold it against me, right? Because for other generations, his name obviously is synonymous with certain things, and you obviously talked about that. So I certainly don't want to, bring up something dark, but it is a part of his history, with the 1954 McCarthy hearings. And, a lot of people didn't stand when he got that honorary Oscar, I think back in 1999, so you've seen a lot, when it comes to people that, a young Harvey Weinstein who if you want to tell that story, that to me kind of blew my mind. So what's it like knowing people and then kind of seeing things transpire through history?
Well, you don't think of it until you write a book.
Yeah.
It's part of your life. It's part of your existence.
Right.
And often heat begets heat. If you've got something going for you, then there's other people who want to be perhaps involved with you. And Harvey was a rock promoter in Buffalo.
I read that, yeah.
He had a company called Harvey and Corky. He was unbelievably successful in Buffalo. If Sinatra was going to do 6 cities, one of them was Buffalo. If the Rolling Stones were going to do 5, 6, they chose Buffalo. Now, we both know there are many bigger cities than Buffalo.
Without question.
To go to.
Rick James was the biggest star,
That's right. And so he was that good at what he did, and he contacted me, and I was sure, because he told me he had just bought a film with a group named Wings with Paul McCartney, and he wanted to talk to me about it. So I was sure, because I had a company that distributed movies. I was sure he wanted me to distribute it for him. Very surprised when he came up and said, no, I want to learn the film business. I want to distribute it. Would you teach me?
It's amazing.
And I kind of liked him. He was a kid from the streets. He was smart. He had a great sense of humor. In all the time we were together, I never saw anything that came close to what happened to him. Right. Never in my wildest dreams did I think he'd hit the heights he hit, or the depths that he sunk to. I never would have seen it. But he sat on a couch. I would say, okay, I'm calling so-and-so, get on the phone and listen. He had a yellow legal-sized pad. He would listen, take notes. I'd hang up, and he'd ask me about the question, why I said this, why I did that, and I taught him the business. And I was, at one point, quite proud of it. And now I wrote about it, but I'm not exactly running around sharing it,
Right. Well, at the end of the day, right? So, he made his own decisions on the things that he did, and, your path is going to always touch, hands and stories with people who have a variety of different backgrounds. Obviously, his box office successes and his, film career speaks for itself. And then the horrible things that he ultimately was convicted of are part of his story, and he has to face the consequences for them as well. You had, and that's just a part of the path of life. What was it like being vice president, if I could pivot a bit, of Paramount Pictures? Did it just kind of start coming organically once you're producing films and you had your own production company, Castle Hill? I want to make sure I say that in here. That's a varied career.
The career is definitely varied, but, they say a jack of all trades, master of none, so I don't know. But
most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
As far as Paramount was concerned, it was the worst 2 years of my life, despite I had all the trappings of first-class travel, limousines, suites, a lot of backside kissing from people, but I couldn't say yes to anything. Now, here I am. I go into the head of the company and I say, listen, I'm not used to this. I ran the Walter Reed organization. I was the head. I made all the decisions. I mean, I've got to be able to okay a movie. I've got to be able to say, no, you can't do that, but you can pass without telling us, and you can recommend. I said, well, okay. I said, listen, there's a year left of my contract, and we pay people 50 cents on the dollar to leave. I'm in. I'm out.
Damn.
Get me out of here. No, you got to stay. I have to stay. I'm going to convince you that this was Barry Diller. He says, I'm going to convince you that this is the place for you. And then at one point, they said, one of the vice presidents said to me, listen, you're the third highest paid person in the studio. I said, I'll tell you what, make me the fifth and let me okay one movie. Wouldn't do it. So I stayed. Anyhow, my favorite story about that time, Barry said to me, Barry Diller, he was the chairman of Paramount. He said, I just don't understand it. Just tell me, what is it that you don't like? I said, I'm diametrically opposed to everything you do here. And he said, diametrically? I think he could accept that I was somewhat opposed, but the fact that I was so strong about it.
Oh, my God.
But I'm glad that I had the experience, because I realized that I thought I had the talent and I wanted to run a studio. And I found that I may or may not have had the talent, but I knew I couldn't swim in those waters. Those waters were filled with people that I wouldn't want to be in a foxhole with them. Let's put it that way.
Oh, man, I do understand that. I just have a question. It was burning in my mind. Was there any movie that you weren't able to greenlight that maybe turned out to be hugely successful, and you're like, that came?
The only movie I was involved with at my time at those 2 years was Saturday Night Fever. I was involved with it from the beginning to the end, but I had nothing to do with greenlighting it because I was in New York and they were shooting in New York. I was in charge of the shoot. I had about as much to do with its success as you did.
I wasn't even alive when the movie came out.
I rest my case.
You're killing me, man.
Anyhow, the only contribution I made, John Badham was the director, and I went to him and I said, John, there's a lot of four-letter language we're using here, but eventually this is going to play television, and you can't put this language on. Rather than have them beeping it or cutting it, just have him say, something not as horrible, vulgar, or whatever. And that's what we did. So that's my contribution to Saturday Night Fever. Not much.
Hey, listen, you know what though? But the fact that you were even in the time when that was taking place, first of all, your accomplishments speak for themselves. But I just wanted to kind of ask that question: if there was, that one film that was like, whoa. But what was it like?
I'll tell you something you might be interested in. It was very surprising to all of us at Paramount. The very first day of shooting, John Travolta showed up. And we could not control the crowds. The crowds were so gigantic. Now, he had been on a television show with Welcome Back, Kotter, whatever.
Kotter. Yep.
Yeah, and but we had no idea the following this guy had. And so we had to get the New York City police and put up barricades. It was amazing. We could not shoot for the whole morning.
Wow.
That was shocking to us because we knew he was a kid from a television show. We didn't know we had a fan base that, could bury almost anyone. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and what's crazy is he had 2 acts in his career, right? Because he had that lull in the 80s, and then for people of my age, I knew him from the Look Who's Talking movies. I knew he was like, a movie, like decent size. But Pulp Fiction was like, oh my God. Like, and then it just put him up, where he is now. He doesn't have to do anything else ever again, because what that put him into, resurrected him times 10.
That's true. Saturday Night Fever was followed up with Grease, and at that point, he was probably the biggest movie star in the country.
Yeah.
It's
and
then
amazing.
He made Moment to Moment, and that was a gigantic bomb. And then he became like every other actor, good ones, bad ones, making movies,
Yeah. And, but I'm still a fan of his because he's still legendary with the work that he did. You've also done record producing, you've done Broadway. You have how did you expand into those other avenues of entertainment? Did it just kind of come organically? You're meeting musicians and how did that kind of branch off for you?
Well, I went to college and got a degree, and all my friends were professionals. They became lawyers and doctors and dentists. And since I knew I wanted to be in show business and there was no such thing as getting a master's or a PhD in show business, I decided to learn every part of the entertainment business. I decided that I would not only be an expert in one field, I would try to become an expert in everything: television, theater, movie, everything. And I spent hours and days, reading and being interviewed and interviewing people until I felt I had the knowledge of almost all aspects of the business. And then I said, let's see now where I can apply it. What can I do? Now that I have the knowledge, what am I going to do with it? And that's how it happened. And Paramount, as I said, was such a miserable experience for me that I said, I can't work. It's obvious I can't work for somebody. I have to be my own boss. And so I went out with great trepidation to open up my own company. It was called Castle Hill. Yeah. And we ended up representing and owning 500 motion pictures, and some of the greatest motion pictures that were ever made, including John Ford's Stagecoach and Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent and
Unbelievable.
Breaking Morant and, Glengarry, Glen Ross. We had a huge library of terrific movies. And
I love that movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Dave.
It was just it was a dream, and as Elvis sang, you got to follow that dream wherever that dream may lead you.
Yeah,
and it worked. It worked. I was very glad about it. Everybody has their ups and downs, and clearly I did. But by and large, I used to say, and still do, it's only work if you don't want to do it.
Amen to that, brother. And, what's funny is I think of Glengarry Glen Ross, right? It started out as a play by David Mamet, right? And so then it transitioned to film. And what's funny is the Alec Baldwin character wasn't even in the play, right? So for people who watch the movie, we'll say, you want to talk about 4-letter words, right? Like that 15-minute appearance that man had, is anybody who hasn't seen it, it's one of the greatest performances you'll ever see because he stole the show.
I think it's probably one of the great male casts of all time.
Oh my gosh. It's unbelievable.
Jack Lemmon, and you've got so many wonderful actors doing it.
Yes, Kevin Spacey.
David had worked in a real estate office. That's how the whole thing became in his head a play. He had worked there. He knew what it was like. He knew what the salesman went through. He wrote that play and put it on first in Chicago and then came to New York with it. He and I worked together, and I recently did a interview with him. So we go back a while now.
Yeah, his work is wonderful. It's absolutely exquisite. Can you talk about your book, Try Not to Hold It Against Me? Because I want to make sure we reference that too.
Well, it's a book that's I'll give you a laugh, I think. It's a book that got terrific reviews. Oh, that's wonderful. And believe me, I'm proud of it and I'm glad. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. Everybody who wrote didn't write and say what style, what grace, what brilliance. They wrote, we loved it because it's short chapters.
Jeez. Yeah, the attention span of the new American consumer right now. Yeah.
That's right. I think I became the USA Today of books. I couldn't believe it. That's what they think is great. But it was fun to do it. I mean, I wrote it during COVID because I couldn't really do very much. Couldn't leave the house really, or was afraid to. And then when I went on shows like yours, people started asking me questions that led me to believe I have a second book. So I wrote a second book, which I call My First Book, Part 2. and then I recorded them both because I thought, I don't want an actor. He doesn't know what the emotion was when I did this or I felt that. Let me do it myself. And I had been on the radio for 9 years in New York and around the country on a syndicated show. So I knew that I had at least a voice that's at least a professional, if nothing else.
Right.
So I recorded both of them. So that was nice.
And listen, don't downplay yourself. You knew exactly, only you could tell your story, right? And and it wasn't going to be personal. And I think in this era of, inauthenticity or AI chat box is something that it's actually told by you, and you knew that you could tell your story the best. And it meant more to you to do that on your own. And based on your accomplishments, I'm glad you did that. And I'm looking forward to reading some excerpts from that book and getting it myself.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. What happened was over the years, and I bet you've had this happen lately yourself in the last couple of years, people would say, you ought to write a book. You ought to write a book.
People tell me that all the time.
Right. And you say, of course I will one day, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I said the same thing. And I never did it. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would never have done it.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing not one, but two, and that was kind of surprising. I started a third, because I gather I'm starting to sound like Uncle Remus or Ace or something. I've got a lot of stories in me, but I didn't have the fire in the belly. You don't have that fire in the belly.
Yeah,
you got to recognize it and move on to something else. So I wrote a few chapters, and who knows, maybe one day in my dotage, which could be next week.
No, I hope not.
I'll finish it up. I don't know.
Well, your chapters and your stories are the stuff of envy. And the reason why I created this show was because even though we're past the age of the era of radio, this show allows my mind to transport to places that I've never been, talk to people I never would have crossed paths with. So for people who are listening, even if you're not that young boy who's listening to the radio, you can still be inspired and change course simply by dreaming. And it's good that you have lived through the eras that you have, because you've probably seen many dreams, die on the vine, but you pursued yours and you have lived a wonderful life and continue to. And I'm thrilled that you took time out of your busy schedule to speak.
Well, it was a pleasure to speak to you. And as I told you before we went on the air, you gave me some new food for thought. So,
Well,
I hope I can swallow it.
you're the reason, and people like yourself, the reason I made this show was because I decided to act on what I believed in. And I believe that curiosity and success cross all boundaries, regardless of the zip code you're listening to this in. You can be that young boy listening to the radio and end up in Hollywood and Broadway and record producer and the pinnacle of success in your profession if you only act on your dreams and maybe follow that famous director.
Well, I thank you for that. And I'm so proud of you now.
Thank you.
Have learned that you've come and you did follow your dream, and you're doing it now.
I very much
best of luck to you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Julian Schlossberg, you're a legend in your profession and is inspiring words on the Randomness of Nothing podcast. I thank you very much for your time, sir.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.